She was arguing with her boss when he cornered her against the wall. And everything changed. The argument had started quietly. That was the most dangerous kind. The kind that began with clipped professionalism, polite smiles stretched too thin, voices lowered so no one outside the glass-walled conference room could hear the tension vibrating in the air. Lena Harper stood with her arms crossed, her back straight, her jaw set so tightly it ached. Across from her stood Marcus Hale, her boss, the newly appointed executive director, the man who had walked into the company 6 months ago and immediately made it clear that people like her were never meant to rise too high. "You missed the deadline," Marcus said calmly, tapping a pen against the table. "Again." Lena didn't flinch. "I delivered exactly what was requested," she replied, her voice steady. "Early, actually. Your email changing the scope came in after the review meeting." Marcus smiled, not with warmth but with superiority. "You should have anticipated that." Anticipated. That word again. Lena had learned that anticipate was what men like Marcus used when they wanted to move the goalposts and blame someone else for not reaching them. "I can't anticipate instructions that don't exist," she said. "And you approved the proposal." The pen stopped tapping. Silence thickened the room. Marcus took a slow step forward. "You're being difficult," he said. "And that's not a good look for someone in your position." Something inside Lena snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, but decisively. "My position," she repeated. "You mean the one I earned? Or the one you keep reminding me I should be grateful for?" His smile disappeared. "Careful," Marcus warned. "You're crossing a line." "No," Lena said, her voice firmer now. "I'm finally standing on it." She had spent years swallowing comments. Years of being underestimated because she didn't come from the right schools, didn't have the right last name, didn't fit the image of who leadership was supposed to look like. She was tired. Marcus moved again, closer this time. Too close. "You should remember who signs your paycheck," he said quietly. Lena refused to step back. "And you should remember," she replied, "that results matter more than ego." That was when he did it. He stepped forward sharply, forcing her backward until her shoulder blades met the cool glass wall behind her. Not touching her. Not yet. But close enough that she could feel his breath, close enough that the power play was unmistakable. The room seemed to shrink. Employees passed by outside, unaware that something ugly and unspoken was unfolding just inches away. Marcus lowered his voice. "You think you're smarter than me," he said. "That's cute." Lena's heart pounded, not with fear but with fury. "I know I am," she said. For a split second, something flickered in his eyes. Surprise. Then something else. Calculation. He leaned in, resting one hand against the glass beside her head, a cage disguised as confidence. "Let me give you some advice," he murmured. "People like you don't win battles like this." Lena looked him straight in the eye. "You're right," she said softly. Marcus smiled again, already tasting victory. "I don't win them." She paused. "I end them." That was the moment everything changed. Because Marcus Hale had made a fatal mistake. He assumed Lena Harper was powerless. He assumed her calm meant weakness. He assumed her silence meant submission. He had no idea that the woman he had just cornered against a wall was the very person who could bring his carefully constructed empire crashing down, not with screaming, not with accusations, but with something far more dangerous. The truth. And Lena had been carrying it quietly for a very long time. The day they taught her to stay small. Lena Harper didn't leave the conference room right away. She waited until Marcus Hale stepped back, until his smug smile settled into something that looked like certainty. Then she walked past him without another word, heels steady against the polished floor, spine straight, hands no longer trembling. But the moment the elevator doors closed behind her, the mask cracked. Her reflection in the mirrored walls stared back at her, composed on the outside, burning on the inside. The pressure in her chest felt like a held breath she'd been carrying for years. Not because of Marcus. Because of what he represented. This wasn't the first time a man like him had tried to put her in her place. It was just the boldest. Years earlier, Lena had stood in a very different room. A narrow office. Flickering fluorescent lights. A desk cluttered with files that weren't hers to manage, but somehow always became her responsibility. She was 23, freshly graduated, clutching a resume she'd rewritten 10 times to sound less confident than she actually was. She'd learned quickly that confidence made people uncomfortable when it came from someone like her. "Your background is unconventional," the hiring manager had said, peering at her over reading glasses. Unconventional meant poor. Unconventional meant first generation. Unconventional meant she hadn't been groomed for boardrooms and brunches with venture capitalists. But she smiled anyway, thanked him for his time, took the entry-level job no one else wanted, and she worked harder than everyone. She stayed late, fixed mistakes that weren't hers, learned systems no one bothered to teach her. When a senior analyst quit suddenly, Lena absorbed his workload without complaint. When a project succeeded, the credit floated upward. When something failed, it landed squarely on her desk. And every time she pushed back even gently, the response was the same. Be patient. Pay your dues. Don't be difficult. Stay small. That was the unspoken lesson. By the time she was promoted into management, a promotion she'd fought tooth and nail for, she already knew the rules of survival. Keep receipts. Document everything. Speak calmly. Never react emotionally, because emotion would be used as evidence against her. So when Marcus Hale arrived 6 months ago, she recognized the pattern instantly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult her directly. He did something far more dangerous. He questioned her competence just enough to plant doubt. He reassigned her work without explanation. He interrupted her in meetings, then praised her passion when she defended her ideas. He gave her impossible deadlines, then asked why she looked stressed. And slowly, methodically, he began isolating her. Until today. Until the wall. The elevator dinged. Lena stepped out onto her floor, straightened her blazer, and walked toward her office. Lena? She turned to see Naomi, one of the junior coordinators, hovering near the copier. Naomi's eyes flicked nervously toward Marcus's office down the hall. You okay? Naomi asked quietly. Lena hesitated. She wanted to say yes. Wanted to protect Naomi from the truth the way no one had protected her. But she saw herself in Naomi, talented, observant, already learning when to stay quiet. I'm fine, Lena said finally. But if anyone asks, I was in a meeting. Naomi nodded, understanding more than Lena wished she had to. Lena closed her office door and sat down heavily. Her inbox was already filling. Subject line after subject line marked urgent. Marcus's fingerprints were all over them. Requests reframed as orders. Clarifications twisted into criticism. CCs added strategically, executives, legal, HR. A paper trail. Marcus wasn't just flexing power. He was setting her up. And that's when Lena made her decision. She reached into her bottom drawer and pulled out a slim black folder. Inside were documents she'd hoped she'd never have to use. Emails forwarded to herself months ago. Meeting transcripts. Calendar logs. Performance metrics that contradicted Marcus's claims point by point. And something else. Something much bigger. Something Marcus had no idea she possessed. Across the building, Marcus Hale leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. That had gone better than expected. He hadn't needed to raise his voice. Hadn't needed to threaten her outright. The wall had done the talking for him. Women like Lena always pushed until they hit resistance. Then they folded. He opened his laptop and drafted a message. To HR. Subject: concern regarding professional conduct. He typed carefully, choosing language that sounded reasonable, concerned, responsible. I've noticed increasing resistance and emotional responses from Lena Harper when receiving feedback. Perfect. He hit send and smiled. By the end of the quarter, she'd either fall in line, or be gone. Either way, the message would be clear to the rest of the team. Don't challenge him. Marcus glanced at the framed photo on his desk. Him shaking hands with the board chairman at a charity gala. Untouchable. That's what he believed. What Marcus didn't know was that Lena Harper had learned long ago that power doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like patience. Sometimes it looks like preparation. And sometimes it looks like a woman who has been underestimated for so long that everyone forgets to check how far she's climbed while they weren't looking. That afternoon, Lena forwarded one email. Just one. Not to HR. Not to Marcus. To an address she hadn't used in years. The reply came 20 minutes later. I was wondering when you'd call, it read. Are you finally ready? Lena closed her laptop, heart pounding, not with fear but with resolve. Marcus Hale had made her a problem. Now she was about to become a reckoning. The power she never told anyone about. Lena didn't sleep that night. Not because she was afraid, but because her mind wouldn't slow down. The city outside her apartment hummed softly, lights blinking in distant windows like witnesses to lives unfolding quietly. She sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, the black folder spread out beside her like a map she'd memorized long ago. She hadn't planned for this moment. She'd prepared for it. There was a difference. Years earlier, after her first major setback, the one that nearly broke her, Lena had learned a brutal truth: survival wasn't enough. If she wanted to be safe, if she wanted to be untouchable, she needed leverage. So while others celebrated promotions or chased titles, Lena did something different. She built something on the side. Something no one at the company knew about. Something Marcus Hale would never expect. Back then she'd been invisible. Just another capable employee whose ideas were used, whose name was forgotten. So she started consulting quietly. Nothing flashy. Small contracts at first. Fixing broken workflows, untangling operational chaos, rescuing projects companies thought were doomed. She was good. No, she was exceptional. Word spread. Clients came back. Then they referred others. Lena learned how companies actually worked behind the polished decks and rehearsed mission statements. She learned where power pooled and where lies hid. And when a tech startup approached her with an offer of equity instead of cash, she said yes. That decision changed everything. The startup exploded 2 years later. Then another investment paid off. Then another. Lena never bragged. Never updated her LinkedIn. Never changed her lifestyle. She still took the train. Still lived modestly. Still let people assume she needed the job more than it needed her. Because assumptions were useful. By the time Marcus Hale arrived at the company, Lena Harper was quietly worth more than most of the executives who looked down on her. And she still showed up every day. Because this job was never about money. It was about something else. The next morning, Lena walked into the office like any other day. Same neutral expression. Same professional tone. But something had shifted. Marcus noticed it immediately. She wasn't avoiding him. She wasn't tense. She was calm. Too calm. During the leadership meeting, Marcus tried to reassert control. "We'll need weekly progress reports," he said, glancing at Lena. "Given recent issues." Several heads turned. Lena nodded once. Of course. No argument. No defensiveness. Marcus frowned. He'd expected resistance. Or nerves. Or resentment. Instead, she presented her numbers, clean, precise, impossible to challenge. When a board advisor questioned her projections, Lena answered smoothly, backing every claim with data Marcus hadn't even seen yet. The room leaned toward her. Marcus felt it, that subtle shift when attention moved away from him. Irritating. After the meeting, he intercepted her in the hallway. "Step into my office," he said quietly. Lena didn't hesitate. This time, when the door closed, Marcus stood behind his desk, not in front of her. He was adjusting. "You seemed different today," he said. "More agreeable." Lena smiled politely. "I'm always agreeable when expectations are clear." Marcus studied her. "Good. Because HR will be reviewing some concerns." There it was. The threat. Lena tilted her head slightly. "Concerns about what?" "Professional behavior," Marcus replied smoothly. "Boundaries. Tone. Resistance to leadership." Lena nodded again. "I welcome the review," she said. Marcus blinked. "You welcome it?" "Yes," she replied. "Transparency is important." Something cold crept up Marcus's spine. "You should be careful," he said. "Processes like this don't usually favor employees." Lena met his gaze, steady, unflinching. "Neither do assumptions," she said. She turned and walked out. Marcus stared after her, unsettled. For the first time he felt something he didn't like. Uncertainty. That afternoon HR scheduled the meeting. 2 representatives. A neutral room. Marcus across the table, looking every bit the composed executive. Lena arrived with a single notebook. Marcus watched her sit calmly, hands folded, eyes attentive. HR began with rehearsed language about workplace culture and feedback. Then Marcus spoke. He framed his narrative carefully: concern, professionalism, leadership expectations. Lena listened without interrupting. When he finished, HR turned to her. "Ms. Harper." Lena opened her notebook. "Before I respond," she said evenly, "I'd like to submit documentation." She slid a folder across the table. Marcus's confidence flickered, just for a second. HR began reading. Emails. Meeting notes. Performance metrics. Marcus's words, highlighted, time-stamped, contextualized. The room grew quiet. Then Lena added gently, "There's more." She reached into her bag and placed another document on the table. A letter. From the board. Marcus's breath caught. HR read it slowly. Their expressions changed. "What is this?" one of them asked. Lena folded her hands. "A disclosure," she said, "of my external role." Marcus stared at her. "External role?" HR cleared their throat. "Ms. Harper, this letter states you are a principal advisor to She named it. A firm Marcus knew very well. A firm that had just acquired a controlling interest in their parent company. Silence crashed into the room. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "That's impossible," he said. Lena looked at him, not with triumph, not with anger. With clarity. "I've been advised to remain discreet," she said. "Until now." HR exchanged looks. "So," Lena continued, "before any conclusions are drawn about my conduct, I think it's important to acknowledge the full context." Marcus swallowed. For the first time since he'd arrived, he wasn't the most powerful person in the room. Not even close. The meeting ended early. Very early. Marcus left without a word. Lena remained seated, answering HR's questions calmly, thoroughly, honestly. By the time she stood to leave, the air felt different. Lighter. But this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Because Marcus Hale still hadn't realized the most important truth of all. Lena Harper hadn't revealed her power to protect herself. She'd revealed it to expose him. And what was coming next would make the wall he'd trapped her against feel like the smallest mistake of his life. When the wall closed in on him, Marcus Hale didn't return to his office after the HR meeting. He walked past it. Past the glass walls, past the assistants who looked up and then quickly looked away, sensing something was wrong. His stride was controlled, but inside, his thoughts were splintering. External advisor. Board disclosure. Controlling interest. The words replayed in his mind like a malfunctioning alarm. Lena Harper hadn't just defended herself. She had outflanked him. And worse, she had done it without raising her voice, without humiliation, without giving him anything to fight back against. That was what terrified him most. By the next morning, the atmosphere inside the company had changed. Not loudly. Not obviously. But in the way people suddenly paused when Marcus entered a room. In the way conversations stopped just a second too early. In the way executives who used to greet him with easy familiarity now kept things formal, distant, controlled. He checked his inbox. No new directives from the board. That was unusual. Normally they were quick to reassure him, to affirm his authority. Today there was only one message. From legal. "Please make yourself available this afternoon." Marcus's jaw tightened. He forwarded the message to his assistant with a curt note and tried to focus on work, but his concentration slipped. His eyes kept drifting to the glass wall of his office. To Lena's office across the floor. She was there. Working. Calm. Focused. Unbothered. As if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't just shifted the balance of power in a single meeting. Lena, meanwhile, was finishing a report she'd started weeks ago. She didn't rush. Didn't gloat. She knew better than to celebrate too early. People like Marcus didn't collapse immediately. They unraveled slowly, pulled apart by their own arrogance. Her phone buzzed. A message from a number she hadn't saved but knew by heart. Legal is meeting with him today. He's panicking. Lena exhaled slowly. Good. But panic alone wasn't justice. Justice required clarity. The legal meeting lasted longer than Marcus expected. Questions piled up. Not accusations, not yet, but inquiries. Requests for explanations. Why certain performance reviews were written the way they were. Why project delays were framed selectively. Why language appeared inconsistent across internal communications. Marcus answered carefully. Too carefully. And that was the problem. Because the more he spoke, the clearer the pattern became. By the time he left the room, his shirt clung slightly to his back. Sweat. Fear. Something he hadn't felt in years. That afternoon, Lena was called into a separate meeting. Not HR. Not legal. The board. She entered the room and immediately understood the shift. No hostility. No skepticism. Only interest. "We owe you an apology," the chairwoman said without preamble. "For not seeing what was happening sooner." Lena inclined her head slightly. "I didn't ask for special treatment," she replied. "Only fairness." The chairwoman nodded. "And you were denied it." Another board member leaned forward. "We're conducting a full review of leadership conduct. In the meantime, we'd like to ask you something." Lena waited. "Why stay?" the man asked. "With your background, your resources, you could have left." Lena paused. Then she answered honestly. "Because if I leave every time someone tries to push me out," she said, "nothing changes. The next person just suffers quietly." Silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Respectful. Marcus found out about the board meeting later that evening. From someone who used to call him a mentor. The call was brief. Careful. "Things are moving," the man said. "You should prepare." "For what?" Marcus snapped. "For consequences." The line went dead. Marcus sat alone in his apartment, staring at the city skyline. He thought about the wall, the glass, the way he'd stepped forward, confident, certain. For the first time, he understood what that moment must have felt like for her. Cornered, watched, judged. And now the roles had reversed. The official announcement came 2 days later. An internal memo. Neutral language. Temporary reassignment pending investigation. Marcus Hale would be stepping back from operational duties effective immediately. No mention of Lena. No explanation. But everyone understood. Whispers rippled through the company. Some people looked shocked. Others looked relieved. A few looked ashamed. Marcus cleared out his office under supervision. No confrontation. No drama. As he walked toward the elevator with a box of belongings in his arms, he saw Lena standing near the windows. She didn't block his path. Didn't smile. Didn't gloat. She simply met his eyes. And in that moment, Marcus felt something far worse than anger. He felt small. Lena watched the elevator doors close behind him. Her hands trembled, not from fear but from release. This wasn't victory. This was balance being restored. But there was still one thing left. Something personal. Something unresolved. And Lena knew that justice to truly matter had to be spoken aloud. The surprise that finally set her free. The building felt quieter after Marcus Hale left. Not empty, just lighter. Lena noticed it in small ways. Laughter returning to meeting rooms. People speaking without checking over their shoulders. Naomi walking a little taller, no longer shrinking when executives passed by. Power had shifted. But Lena knew something important. Silence after injustice isn't peace. It's just a pause. And she wasn't done yet. 3 days after Marcus's reassignment, Lena received an email marked mandatory attendance. From the board. Subject: Leadership and Accountability Forum. It wasn't framed as a disciplinary hearing. It was framed as a conversation. That alone told her everything. The room was full when Lena arrived. Executives. Managers. Church all legal. Even a few board members seated quietly along the wall. This wasn't about Marcus anymore. This was about the culture that had allowed him to thrive. The chairwoman stood at the front. "We're here today," she said, "because systems don't fail by accident. They fail by permission." Eyes moved subtly toward Lena. The chairwoman continued. "We've asked Ms. Harper to speak. Not as an accused party, but as a witness." A witness. Lena inhaled slowly and stepped forward. She didn't bring notes. She didn't need them. "I want to be clear," Lena began. "This isn't about revenge." The room stilled. "It's about patterns," she said. "About how easily competence is questioned when it comes from someone who doesn't look the part. About how feedback becomes a weapon when power goes unchecked." She didn't name Marcus. She didn't have to. She spoke about late nights. About impossible expectations framed as opportunities. About being told to anticipate instructions that were never given. She spoke calmly. But every word landed like weight. "I stayed silent longer than I should have," Lena admitted. "Because I was taught that survival was success. That endurance was strength." She looked around the room. "It's not." Silence followed, thick, uncomfortable, necessary. Then she added the part no one expected. "I had options," she said. "I had resources. I could have walked away." A murmur rippled. "But most people don't," Lena continued. "And if someone like me stays quiet, what chance does someone with less have?" She paused. "This company doesn't need another apology memo. It needs accountability. And it needs to change who it listens to." The chairwoman nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said. "That's exactly why we're making changes." What came next stunned the room. Effective immediately, a new oversight committee would be formed. Employee-led. With direct access to the board. And then the chairwoman turned to Lena. "We'd like you to lead it." The offer hung in the air. This wasn't a promotion. It was power, real power. Lena felt something tighten in her chest. Then release. "I'll accept," she said. "On one condition." The board waited. "That this role isn't symbolic," Lena said. "And that when someone speaks up next time, you listen before it reaches a wall." The chairwoman didn't hesitate. Agreed. Marcus Hale heard about the forum later. From a news alert. From the same phone that hadn't rung in days. The article was careful. Corporate. Polished. But the subtext was brutal. He hadn't just been removed. He'd been replaced by something better. He stared at the screen, remembering the moment he'd leaned in, confident she'd shrink. He'd thought the wall was the end of the conversation. He'd been wrong. Weeks later, Lena stood in her office, no longer hers alone but open, transparent, intentionally so. Naomi knocked softly. "They're ready for you," she said. Lena smiled. "Let's not keep them waiting." As she walked down the hall, people didn't look away. They looked up. Not with fear. With respect. She hadn't taken Marcus's place. She'd erased the need for it. And for the first time in her career, Lena Harper felt something she'd never been promised but had finally earned. Not safety. Not approval. Freedom.